The hosts and guests on Everything's Messy podcast are not licensed healthcare professionals. The discussions in our episodes are not personalized medical advice. Always consult a qualified healthcare provider for medical guidance. Never delay seeking professional medical advice or emergency assistance because of our podcast. We encourage consulting with a healthcare professional before making any significant health changes. By listening to our podcast, you agree to the disclaimer. Thank you for listening to Everything's Messy podcast. Hey, welcome to Everything's Messy podcast, where we celebrate the beautiful but messy life experiences that most, if not all, people go through. Get ready to embark on an exciting journey through the raw and unfiltered stories of everyday people. Here, we dive into messy realities of life, from making messy mistakes to triumphs and everything in between. Are you sensing a theme? That's right, it's messy. But this just isn't about the mess. It's about finding strength and resilience in the midst of it all. We'll explore how health, fitness, and wellness play a crucial role in navigating life's twists and very messy turns. And we'll challenge conventional systems, because sometimes the most unconventional paths lead to the greatest discoveries. Join us as we embrace the messy, beautiful, and endlessly fascinating stories. Each episode is a testament to the power of our messy journeys and the beauty that emerges from the mess. So grab your favorite beverage, coffee, sparkling water, whatever it may be, and prepare to be inspired. Are you ready? Let's get messy. Hey, messy warriors, what is happening? I am Sarah, your messy host. This is Everything's Messy podcast. Okay, so if you didn't listen to last week's episode, please go back and listen. I sat down with my dad. We got to talk about mental toughness and his distinguished career with Los Angeles Police Department. It was just a really good feeling podcast. You know, a lot of the times we talk about the messy stuff on this podcast, sometimes really sad, but powerful. This was a little more upbeat and just talking about, you know, having that grit, that mental toughness. Where does that come from? What are we doing with it? And so I hope you guys enjoyed it. Again, if you didn't listen to it, go back last week and listen to it. You won't be disappointed. I've got a couple of good guests coming up in the future. But today, I really wanted to sort of piggyback on last week's episode and talk about how we're getting distress tolerance. How are we getting past these lines that we always hear, whether it be TV, social media, or just in our own language as we're speaking to friends, family, and other people. I'm trying to narrow down and navigate what does distress tolerance not only mean, but what does it look like? And are we glossing over it? Are we giving it too much emphasis? Do we feel like, I know, especially in, you know, millennial generation and now the Gen Z generation and now even getting into Gen Alpha generation, we're really good about knowing buzzwords and having the language of our emotions, tapping into our feelings, not suppressing them anymore. And I know that that is a positive thing. That's great. But I also think it's becoming very saturated. And I think sometimes we're leaning on it as a crutch to excuse our behavior because we're sitting in these emotions. Now, I am the first one to say, if you are struggling with messy emotions, you have to sit in it, right? That's where we know if we're sitting in those messy emotions, the next step is going to be the strength that we get for coming out of that messy situation and use it and apply it to no longer be in that state. And or if we're struggling with victimhood and things like that, right? That's going to catapult us out if we're working the framework correctly and doing it the right way. But what happens if we don't even know really how to define it or what that means for us? So and I took a lot of notes, and normally I don't take notes, but I did really want to talk about, you know, this topic and how a lot of people sound very articulate when they're talking about their emotions. They sound very intelligent because they have all these words. But are we really diving deep into emotion? Is it becoming an excuse for behavior, which behavior is not an emotion, and it shouldn't be an excuse for the behavior? So let's just kind of get into that. So first, let's talk about really, you know, why we struggle. Why do we struggle, right? Do we, blow past it? Do we stuff it down and make it not We don't want to talk about the emotion. Do we talk too much about it? And then, have you ever noticed, like, a lot of times if you retell a story or you have the same answer for things, and if you notice after you tell it so many times, or after you answer the same question so many times, it kind of starts to lose meaning. Not that it's as important. And I don't mean lose meaning as it's not as powerful, but it just starts to feel rehearsed and robotic. And it's just, man, I want to talk about something else right now. And I think part of that is we just bite in or dive into so much of how we frame things. It's almost a muscle memory of how our brain is just going to react to the same question or react to the same story. And so I want to make sure we're having clear, concise thoughts about our emotions, how we're feeling, and that they actually mean something versus just being robotic with it. Does that make sense? I'm talking to all of the people that are listening, of course, who cannot answer me back, but that's what I'm trying to get here. So if you only have words, okay, if you only have words for fine or I'm losing it, that means everything sort of feels like a crisis, right? Every emotion you're going through, it sort of feels like a crisis. The goal isn't to feel better, it's to feel more accurately. Let's think about that. It's to feel more accurately, right? So what do we mean by cultivating more emotion? We're not trying to become more emotional, right? But that's kind of a bad word. We don't want to be more emotional or emotional at all, right? Those can be sticky, tricky, and sometimes it does cloud our judgment for a little bit if we're really emotional because we aren't thinking in a logical space. We're in our feelings. And there's no right or wrong to that. It's just depends on what we're going through in that we're going to have a difference of what our opinion might be. So if we're not trying to become more emotional, we're learning to differentiate what we're actually feeling, expand beyond good or bad, not negative, not positive, somewhere in the middle, right? Because that's where the growth happens, honestly. And then we need to catch our emotions earlier before they do explode. So, for instance, let's get a little specific. A lot of people say I'm stressed, I'm overwhelmed, I'm annoyed. But those are what they call umbrella emotions, blankets a lot of things without having to give a lot of detail. And what we need to be saying instead, because we're trying to solve a problem or help us solve the problem, right? So we need to give a little more context. So instead of, I'm so overwhelmed, we need to say something like, I feel pressured. I'm feeling a lot of pressure, right? Okay. I feel unprepared. I feel resentful. I feel mentally exhausted, right? Because we do. But specific emotions create specific solutions. Specific emotions create specific solutions. So you can't solve being overwhelmed. It's really hard to solve. You can express that, you can say that, but to be more accurate, you can solve, I feel unsupported. I feel unsupported. So you can challenge that with, how can I support you? What do you need to feel supported? And right away, if you're speaking to somebody who's really overwhelmed and you flip that on its axis and you offer them your help, how can I support you? Because they've led with, I feel unsupported. Now we can get somewhere. Now we can make a plan. Now we can say, how can I support you? What do you need? And of course, we don't want to leave it open-ended or too unspecific, but it's at least a start. It's at least a start. The person receiving that information can now look at this person and say, okay, they feel unsupported. Feeling overwhelmed seems sort of like automatic when we're not feeling supported. However, if we're changing the dynamic in our head and sort of flipping that switch, somebody else can go back and say, okay, they feel unsupported. Okay, let's go down the list. What do you need help with? What's the first thing on that list? And now we're getting somewhere. And I know that seems like, come on, Sarah, that seems obvious, but not really, especially when you're dealing with someone who has all of these emotions tightly packed into their body and they're brimming over, what's that going to look like? It could look like an explosion. It could look like now they can't regulate their emotions, not because they don't know how, or not because they don't have maturity, but because they're going through so much right now that explosion is the only way they know how to react to what they're feeling. So before that happens, we need to have an open dialogue of, how can I support you? Are they still going to feel stressed? Sure. I know I would. But to know that we're going to weed through the mud one problem at a time, and maybe not solve all of them, but even just taking one thing off that list, that's going to be improvement. That's going to help. So let's talk about normalize non-positive emotions, aka negative emotions, right? So this is to my women, all my women, but men too. And I really want to be very careful with this, because it's not bad what I'm about to say, but it is, sometimes I know I have left more angry when somebody has told me this, okay? So as women, we're taught, be grateful, don't complain, stay positive. And that's all great. And we have so much to be grateful for. Let me change that, and I'll just apply it to me. I have so much to be grateful for. And I truly, truly mean that. And yes, there are a lot of times when I start to get angry or agitated, I can close my eyes and just start listing the ways that I feel blessed and grateful. That is true. But if I'm having to suppress all my negative emotions and I'm still not dealing with them, then I can be grateful till the cows come home, but that's not having me actually deal with those emotions. Those emotions aren't necessarily going to go away. They might lessen, but then something's going to happen and it's going to wind me back up again, and I'm back where I started, right? So if we're suppressing anything that's negative, it's going to come out somehow, like I've always said. So, and hear me, you don't need the permission from me, but you need the permission from yourself for frustration, resentment, disappointment, irritation. You give yourself permission to feel those things. Feel the ick. Feel whatever comes with that. Give yourself permission. That's okay. It is okay for a little while, not a long while. It is okay to sit there and say to yourself, I give myself permission. I'm just going to be frustrated right now. When you can express that and you give yourself that out, where you're not trying to say, okay, just calm down. You have so much to be grateful. You have no right to be angry. That just tells us we're not allowed to be negative. We're not allowed to sit in those emotions. And that doesn't really help us deal with it. We're going to have a lot better result if we sit in the ick, if we sit in the mess, if we sit in the frustration, the anger, the resentment. Learn to breathe. Start breathing it out. Go for that walk. Go for that nature hike. Remove ourselves from the current environment that we're in. Then we can focus on, I am so grateful for my life. Is this really as big as I think it is, or am I just tired and it's built up in my head? Am I really feeling these emotions, or is it a trigger from something else that I haven't dealt with? And probably all of those things are true. All things can be true, right? And let me say again, for the men too, but just because it's not a pretty emotion doesn't mean it's the wrong one. It really doesn't. Especially when we're talking about resentment. Resentment usually stems from a boundary that has been broken. Not all the time, but usually stems from a boundary that has been broken. So, did you not keep your boundary? Are you mad at yourself? Did you express your boundary without any question, like they knew the boundary and they did it anyway? It's sometimes good to have that self-reflection on how are we doing with the boundaries we've created. So then that helps us when we do feel that resentment, when we do become, irritated and agitated and overwhelmed. Is it something that we can turn back on us and say, okay, I really need to be better about setting this boundary. No, I don't want to make 100 cookies the night before they're due. I don't. I'm not going. Whatever the boundary is, were we clear about it? Take the lesson from us, but then make sure going forward, without spitefulness, without anger, without the, I'm going to show you, none of that. Just insert the boundary back in, and this time it's going to be stuck to. And if that person did do it on purpose, perhaps maybe that's not a person that needs to be in your life to begin with, especially if the boundary was clear. When people say I'm fine, we all know when a woman says that, they're not fine. And you better run the other way. It means they're not ready to tell you about how they're feeling. They're not ready to process it or deal with it. And for my case, it just means I want to be mad right now. I'm not ready to make nice. I'm not ready to probably apologize if I need to, or even discuss what it is that happened. I'm not ready. Just not ready. And we need to recognize that. It's okay for the person who's mad to ask for the space, and it is definitely okay for the person asking to give them the space. Walk away. Just walk away. When they're ready, you may not even be the person they need to talk about it with, but just give them space. They'll come around. If you're going to push at them, though, and push at them, it's just going to create bigger emotions, not feeling heard, feeling resentment, feeling irritated. Just trust me, walk away. And let's talk about when they're especially in my case, and again, I'm speaking for most women, at least a lot of the women that I know in my life, there's steps in between from the I'm fine to the rage. It just doesn't happen, I'm fine, and then there's rage. No, there's things that's happened in between. And it's really good to be able to recognize those before that rage comes, right? It might actually be you're slightly irritated, right? You're slightly disappointed, feeling dismissed. All of these things start to build. It's not, most women don't go from, nothing to then rage. That I'm fine, that's your start of there's a bigger problem here. And again, men do this too. Men just do it, I feel, sometimes it can be explosive. Sometimes it can be passive aggressive. Sometimes they don't know what to do. And that's a trickier slope because as women, we automatically want to especially when we're not the one wounded, somebody else is wounded, we want to make it better for them. We want to quickly apologize and get it over with. We want to make sure, they feel comfortable. And with men, again, my experience, that can be a little more difficult, especially if they go right to the explosive part. That means that they have had all of this turmoil inside, unless we're dealing with, toxicity. And I'm not speaking to that on this episode right now. This is just somebody who's overwhelmed, who can process emotions and normally does, but maybe they've had a couple bad months. Maybe it's been a bad year. Maybe they've been dealing it with for a really long time and there's just no place to put it. They're not sure where to put it, how to deal with it. And so it goes from 0 to 100 and then we're exploding, right? And again, women can do that too. So instead of asking, I love the way people always, let me reiterate, mostly women, some men might, but mostly women say, what's wrong with me? What am I doing wrong? How can I fix it? What do I need to do? But anybody, regardless of the gender, it's a better way if you start asking, what am I actually feeling right now? Instead of trying to place blame and instead of trying to figure it out, let's back up and almost to a pre-step. What am I feeling right now? And if we can be pretty concise, we can go back to the event, we can go back to the exact emotion, where it started, what we're feeling, then we can start to go forward and see how we can work that out. Real life example. Just throwing this out there. It's not against my husband or anything. We're just going to use this as an example. Okay. Let's say your husband doesn't text you back and it's sort of immediate. It's about making plans. Maybe something's happening with kids at school, whatever it may be. And immediately you're like why can't he just text me? I'm mad, right? But underneath, the feelings could be more to the point of, I feel ignored, I feel unimportant, and I feel disconnected. All right. That's a bigger emotion and comes from dealing with that specific person, because you have to ask yourself, are you just mad at your husband and why he didn't text you back? And maybe that's more there, or your friend who didn't text you back for 3 days, but it's no big deal. Maybe you don't have that kind of connection with her, or whatever. We just need to be, and again, this is just an example, but we need to be able to take it, reverse engineer the problem, and see where it's stemming from. Where is it coming from? Right? So now let's kind of switch into the core distinction and what I started out wanting to really get to the crux of. There's a difference between expressing an emotion and acting out a behavior. So this is for me. I don't think I'm alone in this camp, though. I get irritated when people say something unkind or rude, whatever it may be, and they followed up with, I'm just speaking my truth. And I feel like we're getting confused and it's getting diluted because they basically have taken something that should empower us and make us feel tall and that we're confident, right? I'm just speaking my truth. And they've manipulated that into, I can say whatever I want as long as I say I'm speaking my truth, so you can't hold me accountable for bad behavior. And that's where I think this really gets to me on any generation being able to say, well, I'm just speaking my truth. That's not helpful, especially, again, when it's followed with something rude, unkind, and they're using it as their excuse. That's what I have the problem. So you can change the, I'm just speaking my truth with the, well, I'm just being honest. Sometimes what they're really doing, let's be honest, is either venting their own unprocessed emotions, they're justifying reactive behavior, which again, reactive behavior, and they're avoiding responsibility for their delivery. This is a big one. We are all allowed to say what we want. But when you're using it to hide behind and you're avoiding the responsibility for your delivery, meaning I have a hall pass, I can say whatever I want because it's my truth. When we're leaving out being human to one another, being kind to one another, and let's just say this person doesn't have the discernment or doesn't understand exactly what, reduction in stress tolerance looks like. I feel like it's a slippery slope to go down when we're using the expression, I'm just speaking my truth. We all need to be held accountable and responsible for what we're saying, even if it is truthful, but there's a way to deliver it. There is a way to say to your parents, to your children, to your spouse, to your friends, there is a way to deliver it that has some kindness behind it. And I think a lot of what I'm seeing is just people saying, I can say anything I want as long as I tell you it's my truth. No, I disagree. I don't think you can. You're entitled to say what you're thinking. You can definitely have an opinion about whatever the situation is. But if you deliver it in a shitty way, not only do I think it's not going to be receptive on my end to you saying it to me, it shows me that you're not capable of handling a crisis or handling a sticky situation or being able to process maturely what's going on. And I think that's a big deal. So I really think we can do better. I really do, right? When somebody says, you never help me, you're so selfish, or whatever they're going to say, that's an attack, which is a behavior. That's not they're acting in emotion, but what they're doing is a behavior. It's attacking, right? Instead of when you've calmed down, when you've done your box breathing, 4-4-4-4, right? We talk about this, the Navy SEALs do it. And you're able to come back and say, I feel unsupported. And you can add, I'm overwhelmed right now. I feel unsupported. That's emotion said in truth. That's what's happening. Okay. Which then you can respond with something like, your feelings are valid. And that means their delivery and your delivery is still responsibly kind. And that's what it really needs to be. When you say my truth and you just put it out there on any way you want to, and a lot of times I think we get into this where, man, I'm so glad I have a friend who's brutally honest. Yeah, I would say I prefer honesty, but I also don't need somebody to be cruel to me or unkind to me or make me feel crappier than I already do because they decide to tell me what the truth is. I don't need it sugar-coated. I really don't. I do respect and would appreciate a more of a straight shooter, but I don't need it delivered without some love behind it. That's for sure. And I feel like that's for everybody. That's for everybody, because if we don't and we're hiding behind our truth, for those not watching on YouTube, I'm using air quotes, hiding behind her truth, you could damage relationships, shut down communication, and it'll keep you stuck in just the reactive cycle. You're always reacting to each other. It's just reaction, reaction, reaction. It's not, it becomes like a defense mechanism, a shield, if you will, instead of a tool. And that's where I feel we're missing the mark here. So, and here's the thing. I am not shaming people for speaking up. Absolutely not. I want you to speak up. I just want to sort of redefine it. I want you to speak your truth, but I want it to actually land. And how's it going to land? Again, I don't need it sugar-coated. I actually don't do well with sicky sweet, but there needs to be good intention behind it. There needs to be love. If your truth is hurting everyone around you, it might not be the truth. It might be your own unprocessed emotion. So here's a little simple exercise, and it's a filter, right? Thinking about, and I was taught this as a kid, and I'm sure for those that are my age or older, I think you can remember this or you still implement it. But before speaking, right, we need to think about what it means before we open our mouth. I've been told that my whole life, right? So with emotion, you can start with, what am I actually feeling? That goes back to, yes, I'm overwhelmed, but what's really happening is I have nobody to help me, so I feel unsupported, right? How do I want this to land to the person that I'm going to say it to? I want them to walk away knowing I've got your back. I am willing to sit here in the trenches and be messy with you. And I'm not going to bring you down in the process, right? Mm-hmm. And talking about delivery, can I say this without attacking you? And usually the answer is yes. Yeah, there's all this tough love and you want it to land, but there's a way. I have always been told my whole entire life, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And that is so true with everything in my life. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. Okay? A really, really good example is there's two people that I've had experiences with. And the first person was able to articulate, to tell me what's going on. And even though I was the one who, was wrong and I needed to hear the hard truth, I end up thanking this person, right? I'm in the wrong. Hey, thank you, because of their delivery. And then there's another person who I've gone toe-to-toe with before, and nothing was resolved. And I'm not thanking this person, and we're just going to be in this toxic cycle because there's no way out, because there's no love, there's no kindness, there's no willing to get to the other side without somebody, just wanting to feel hurt all the time. And I think both situations exist, both situations happen. And again, you get in trouble, you do the wrong thing, and you end up thanking the person for it. Or you have a really bad cycle with somebody and it just doesn't get any better and there's no peace on either side and it's just a vicious cycle. And what is the point? What is the point? There's no growth, there's no healing, there's nothing. And so I choose to, try and be receptive, not in a doormat way, but when this person can deliver it and I'm saying thank you, then I know that's how I want to emulate. When somebody says, I'm being real with you. I want to be so authentic with you and so real with you. But being real with you doesn't mean reckless. We don't need to be reckless with somebody else's hurt emotions already, because I don't want to be treated that way either. So don't be reckless. And the word, again, authentic, I feel like that word is overused, but unfiltered isn't the same as authentic. And filtered isn't the same as authentic. And there has to have maturity there. There has to be maturity on both sides. Mature communication is filtered through awareness, not suppression, right? So we can be mature, we can communicate. It doesn't mean the other person needs to shut down. It doesn't mean you need to shut down. We're going to have a filter on. That means we're both aware. There's a lot of awareness going on, self-awareness, reflection, and I don't need to suppress my emotions or my feeling. Distress tolerance is what gives you the space between feeling something and firing it at someone. Wow. Feeling it and firing it at someone. Now, we're all human. We say that expression because that does sort of give ourselves permission to have grace when we don't get this one right. However, if you're unkind or you're coming from a cruel place or you don't have good intentions, then it is on you to fix that, to remedy that, not only internally, but with the person that you're hurting, and realize you don't get a hall pass, you don't get a free, pass to be rude, unkind, inconsiderate. You just don't. You just don't. And, the person that's coming back with, well, you just can't handle it. That's an attack. That's not going to make that person feel any better than what they're already feeling. And they're going to learn very quickly, I might add, and this is my experience, they're going to learn they can't trust you with their vulnerability, with their emotions. They're just not going to come to you. You're done. And maybe that was what you wanted all along, but there was a better way to get there. Going back to when you're feeling this way, when you're setting in those messy spots, again, the box breathing. I can't tell you, that doesn't solve everything, and it may not even solve the way you're feeling, but it can put our mind in a different space, even just temporary, to catch our breath. 4, 4, 4. Breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, hold for 4, breathe in. It's just picture a box, picture drawing the line. You're going to draw that line for 4 seconds. That's going to be your breathe in. You're going to hold it for 4 seconds. That's the other side. You're going to breathe out for 4 seconds, and then going down, you're going to hold the breath out 4 seconds. And it helps you to not only literally concentrate on somebody else or something else in your mind. You have to take up space to do that, but it does just bring us back most of the time, center, and then we can sort of sort through the messiness. And again, make sure you're giving yourself permission to have that frustration. I'm not ready to make nice right now. That's okay. All of those things are okay. There's no judgment. There's no, the journaling and the, feeling grateful and, all of those exercises are really part B. It's getting through part A that you have to concentrate to get to part B. You can't just rush it. Oh, I'm such a terrible person. I'm not grateful enough. I can't even imagine that's what you're telling yourself, because it's okay at this moment to be frustrated, right? What's that song? I'm not ready to make nice. Nope, not going to happen. I'm not ready to back down. That's okay. As long as you don't stay there and you use it as fuel to have bad behavior. As long as you don't use it as fuel to have bad behavior. One sentence, full stop. Once you start using those emotions as an excuse to be unkind, then we have an issue. Here's another thing that I want to make sure gets heard, right? Your truth deserves to be heard. It does. But it's a lot more powerful. Hang on to that word powerful. It's a lot more powerful when it's delivered, not dumped for both parties involved. We all have seen the movies. We've seen when a person gets pushed to the end. But that wasn't just the result at the beginning. They end up in this state of just frenzy because of all the things that happened before they got to that. So let's try and work on focusing to where we can at the beginning before it gets to the end of somebody being pushed beyond their limits. If you are struggling, if you are feeling so unsupported and so overwhelmed, there are so many people and things and resources that you can reach out to. It doesn't have to get to a bad point. It's just having the courage to make that next step to ask for help. And I know that is one of the most scariest things. People feel unworthy. People feel like they can't ask for help. People think, oh, it's gone too far. This is the point of no return. It is never too late, and you are never too old. That is one thing that I have completely learned. And your truth deserves to be heard. We just don't want you to dump it, right? That's the most important part. So that is what I wanted to touch on today. Also, really quick note, as we're talking about these big feelings, big emotions, if you're feeling unsupported, if you're having maybe some crisis thoughts, make sure that you go and you listen to my episodes that I have with Erin, with her skincare line, Mental. She has firsthand knowledge of dealing with suicide, and she has resources and things that can help you if those are something that you're feeling. Hopefully it's not to that point, but there are so many people out there that can help, that are willing to help, that do this, have expertise in this area. This episode was simply to bring, discernment to a topic of, I just feel like it gets thrown around so much that it's just my truth. This is my excuse to be this way. I just don't think that's a slippery slope that we just need to be careful to go down. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please reach out to me. Go to my website, Everything's Messy Wellness. I will be doing a masterclass coming up in April. I don't have a date set yet, but that'll be released within the next 2 weeks. Of if you think you have a message, if you've been thinking about wanting to start a podcast, if you think you have a good idea, somebody you might want to entertain, if you have good questions you want to ask, and you're just like, I wonder what it takes to start a podcast, I will be doing a 1-hour free class on the basics of how to get started. I'll be offering some other things along with that. I'd love for you to just, if you are curious, if you think, I really think if, there's so many people doing podcasts, I want to see what it's all about. Come sit in on my class. I'd love to have you there. I'd love to explain a few things. Remember, if you're doing a podcast to get rich, you are doing it for the wrong reasons, and I will go over that in the class. I'll also be launching my Everything's Messy challenge for mental toughness and grit, that we need to have a little bit more of that toughness, I feel like. Again, not because we don't want to talk about the emotions, but we need to actively do something with that. Thanks for listening to Everything's Messy podcast. Whew, if you made it this far, give yourself a gold star or at least a nap. Honestly, if you showed up today and you were listening, you've already crushed it. I'm so grateful for you listening. If anything hit home, share it, tag me, write it on a sticky note. I don't care. Just don't keep all of this messy goodness to yourself. You can find me on Instagram at Everything's Messy Wellness, or over at my website, everythingsmessywellness.com, where I've got resources, coaching, and probably a new rant about blood sugar or something that's just nonsense. It's all waiting for you. Check out my YouTube channel. I've got all of my podcast episodes up there. And I'm on X at Everything's Mess. Or if you just want to send me an email, Sarah at everythingsmessywellness.com. Look, until next time, hydrate, take no crap, and as always, keep it messy.